Okay, so we need to get this whole text that says easing out and the car to extend like another 10 frames, but I can't just swipe across because in that case I'd be extending the tween here. So I guess I'll just kind of do this in steps. Just swipe across here and get the, do F5 my 10 times. And then down here, click in there and F5 so that that lines up with this here. And probably be a good time to test this in a browser, make sure we didn't mess anything up, because now that I think about it, I probably could have just left that in place. But it all comes out, as long as it looks good is all that really matters. Okay, so when I previewed it, I noticed that masking is staying up here too long, actually staying in when the image comes in. So we need to end that right here. Click and a shift F5 will take care of that. And then also back here, the easing, the actual fade lasts too long, so it starts repeating itself. So remember, that was only 22 frames long. I could have swore we took care of this, but apparently didn't do it quite right. So it should be about right in there. And again, we don't have to get it exact, as long as it looks good is all that matters. So you can see that about here it starts coming back in, and the numbers tell us that 22 plus 100 should take us to frame like 122 or 123, and then we'll just do Shift F5 to get rid of those frames. Yeah, that's kind of good, but it doesn't put it right in the middle, so need to remove a couple frames here. I always find it's easier to remove frames more than what you think you need to move, because it's always easy to then keep your eye on it and do the F5. And so we need that to be about midway. In other words, we need it to be the most opaque when we switch from that visual to the word easing. And then moving that around had an effect on what's going here. So you can see how sometimes it is easier to truly have a unique layer for everything, or just, your own organized way of working. But I think that should look pretty decent now. Yeah, most opaque. Close. Let me just do a Shift F5 here, take out one. Yeah, perfect. Then as you look at your animations, you'll realize that some things that you thought were going slow enough aren't. I think this whole front part is good, but when it fades out, I think it's too fast. The fade in is perfect because we get to see the next topic for a little while and then it comes in. Maybe that one could be a little bit longer. But I think definitely the fade out should be a little longer. So, you can tell that this stuff gets to be a little bit labor intensive, but that's a nice thing about making symbols, is that you only have to go in here and really change the symbol only one time, and then just stretch out the areas where it's used. So we'll go into the actual fade reuse, and we'll make the first part of it, instead of just 10 frames, we'll go ahead and we'll make it 20 frames just by hitting this a few times. And in fact, just for math, easy math sake, why don't we make sure that which it is, exactly 30 frames long. So it should have about, 1 to 20 for the fade in, and then the fade out is pretty quick. Since it's the fade in that we want to be longer, really all we have to do back here at the very beginning is just swipe down. Try that one more time here. Swipe all the way down. Make sure I'm not moving anything as I'm doing that. And then should only have to hit F5 about 10 times. And that should go about 30 frames total. That looks about right to me. Then we just move down, do the same thing over here. Swipe down. I'm including everything, even though I don't really have to go down here because there's nothing after it, but it doesn't hurt. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'll preview that. I won't show you, so much troubleshooting. in the future. But that was one of the things I stressed first day of class, is how important it is to be a good troubleshooter doing this. And you will spend a lot of time when you animate testing and retesting your videos. And so like right now I notice that masking looks fine. When I jump to it, it has the effect that I want, where it just kind of quickly fades in and starts doing its thing. But if it just plays, and rather than start it here at the beginning, I can save a little bit of time and start it playing from about the midpoint by clicking here. And this all looks fine, but watch, there's a little glitch that's going to happen right up here as we're going into the next phase. See right there how easing in just popped back real quick? And after exploring, what I found was causing that is if I scrub the playhead right here, and remember you can use the period keys to move the playhead forward and the commas to move them backwards. So what's happening is we reach maximum opacity on our blocker right there, and then it starts coming back in one frame too soon before I had a chance, or before my animation has a chance to switch over to masking. So easy fix on that is just to click right there, do an F5, and then we should be reaching masking right there. Actually, we could probably put 2 frames in there. So there we are at easing out. You can barely see it there. You can see nothing here where the actual change takes place, and then it starts coming back in. I don't know if you caught this, but I've been working on a recovered file because Flash crashed on me actually twice. No good reason why. That's just one of those things you got to get used to. Nothing is perfect. Even a program that's been around this long, Flash today, Adobe Animate tomorrow, doesn't make a difference. It's going to crash on you. Hopefully very few and far between, but save your files. So I just ran a couple more tests, made sure everything was working fine, and then just saved it under this name, my continuous name that I use. We'll move on to a new topic. And this will be the last time that I go over putting in this fade reuse in here. But since we're going into a new transition from scratch, using it probably doesn't hurt to just talk a little bit about it. So what we've done in the past was our animation finishes, and then we left a second there, and then we jumped right into the next one. But what we've learned is that we actually need 2 seconds there. One for it to just stay there, and then a full second for it to fade out. So we've got our 1 second there. We just need yet 1 more second. So that would take us to about 4:30. So let's extend that to there. And then we're going to go ahead and put our fade so that we get a second of fading. So that would mean that would start right there on this layer. So we'll do an F7 right there, make sure that everything sticks right there. We'll bring out our fade reuse, make sure that it's positioned properly over the stage. Then we need to let it span a total of 30 frames, which would take us out to about right here with an F5, and then right after that at F7. And then we can go ahead and put our next topic in. So I put F7 or a blank keyframe right there in text where the fade reuse becomes the most opaque. And then since I can't even remember what size text we were using, I'm just going to go to the last main topic and steal it. So masking was the last one that we did. And when we put the new text in over there, it extended this one of masking, so I just went in here, put a F7. Now when I get to where the masking is, that the title masking, it's covered up by this fade, so I'll just click the eyeball on that so I can see it once again, and then unlock the text, click here and do a edit copy, and then go back to where I was. And then back here I'm just going to do a edit paste in place. And then once again, turn this eyeball off so I can see that, and then I'll go ahead and paste the text from the grade sheet. And then if you recall, we said we wanted it to fade in for a half second like we did with easing, and then stay there for a second before anything happens. And I don't think we quite completed that on masking. So let's go to masking. And yeah, I had mentioned that that seemed a little fast, and that's because it fades in for a half second but doesn't stay there for a full second before it begins. So here we want to make sure that we select across everything and then put in about 10 F5s. It needs more like 12, so just these next two will get it so that it is what I thought it was, 10 frames. Whoops, that was F6. 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so keep in mind what we have going on here is 1/2 second of fade in, a full second in. So let's go ahead and make sure we've got the same thing going on here where we get to the next topic. So there's our 1/2 second of fade in, or I should say a full second of fade in, 1/2 second of fade out, and then a full second of this showing. So that means 30 more frames to get us to 1.5 seconds. And so that would be about frame 473-ish. I'll just make it 475. Do an F5. We should be good there. Now's a good time to make a backup copy of the folder and do some house cleaning. We can go ahead and close this guide up, and then we should probably go ahead and throw everything except for the actions, buttons, fades, and text in another layer. And since it copied a couple different topics, we can probably just call it like maybe topic 2, 3 or something like that. So new folder. I'll just call it top 2_3. And then we will grab everything except for what I mentioned earlier. Put it inside of there. Close it. Somehow it got on top of the text. Bring it down here. And then let's just rename this one top 1 so they all kind of make more sense. And I made a new layer below text and above that folder. And here I'm just going to put in an F7 and we're going to start the topic of shape tweening. So I put a lot of emphasis on making things into symbols and then animating them with classic tweening. And I 100% stick by that. It's the best, fastest, most reliable, and uses the least amount of computer resources. So commit this to memory. Shape tweening only as a last resort. Now if you're making Swift files to, let's say you get hired by lawyers to present things in a courtroom, then it really doesn't matter because it's going to already be made into a Swift file, can be loaded on a computer. But if you're making things to go on the internet, which would be a next logical step for a lot of you graphic designers, then you really want to use shape tweening and frame by frame animation on a very, very limited basis. Always, if you can, use your symbols with your classic tweens and, in the future, motion tweening. So why would you use a shape tween? You would use it when you actually need to morph something. And I don't mean simply like morphing from a square to a rectangle or stretching or skewing something, because as we saw in the project on classic tweening, we can do all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about like a true morph, like for example, a circle turning into a square. And what I suggest you all do for your shape tween is actually think about what you propose doing for your final class project. And if there's anything in there that you envision morphing, go ahead, give that a shot right in here. So you might want to just try along in another file while I do a couple things just to make sure you get it. And then when you actually go to put it in here, do something that's worthwhile, that you can actually recreate in your final project. So with this first frame created for my shape tween, I'm going to go ahead and just drag out a perfect circle. So I did that with the rectangle tool, and then I'm going to go a certain amount of frames later, and let's make this maybe like take place over 1.5 seconds, and I'm going to do a F7. And that's why this uses so much resources, is because you're not just doing a variation of what you had, and even if you were, it still uses the same amount of resources. It's because to the computer it's a brand new thing. So I'm going to even change color on here so you can see that it does a lot of stuff that classic tweening does, but in a much less efficient way. But it can do something pretty incredible, which is actually morph. So we have our first state over here, a circle, square over here. I'm going to right click and go shape tween, and you can